Welcome to the AI for Business Optimization webinar. This is a webinar hosted by the Center of Excellence. The Center of Excellence in Wireless and Information Technology at Stony Brook University. So my name is Rong Zhao. I'm the Center Director for CEWIT. So again, welcome everyone to the AI webinar. So as a New York State Center of Excellence focused on information technology, CEWIT has worked a lot on AI, machine learning, and related technologies. And these days, AI, and more recently, generative AI, comes up in almost every conversations we have with our colleagues at the university, with students, and not just Stony Brook students, but students from other universities coming to our hackathon events, and also high school, middle school students who come to tour our building or come to our summer programs. So there's a lot of interest about AI, and everybody has a lot of questions as well. So that's why we put together this event today with a really dynamic panel of industry experts. So I'm really looking forward to learning about a lot about AI today, and I hope everyone will join in this conversation and ask questions to our panelists. So now let me introduce the moderator for today's event. My colleague, Dr. Christine Gilbert.
Thank you so much, Rong. So I have the pleasure of introducing our panelists. As Rong alluded to, it is a really impressive group of folks. And so I want to do my due diligence in making sure that you all understand how lucky we are to have them today. So first, I'd like to introduce Ji-Hye Yoon. She's the CEO and founder of RedShred, a text analytics company focused on document understanding and making information accessible as documents as a database. RedShred uses machine learning and natural language processing to find, read, and extract relevant information from complex document sources so developers and data scientists can develop downstream applications. Our next panelist is Pepe Valiente, is an agilist and product leader with extensive experience driving product vision, strategy, and execution. From tech implementations, consulting, and aerospace projects to founding companies, he uses best-in-class methods and business acumen to connect people with products and technology to drive delightful user experiences and value. Moving next to Cole Ingram, who is currently a lead data science instructor at NYC's Data Science Academy. Previously, Cole was chief scientist at an AI music composition company, Amper Music, which was invested in by 2 Sigma and later acquired by Shutterstock. And last but not least, we have Benjamin Powers, who is a technology reporter at The Messenger. He focuses on artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and how privacy concerns are reshaping technology regulations, among other topics. So, as that is evidence of, our panelists are all incredibly impressive and really excited to have them here today. So what we're going to do is we're going to spend the next hour asking our panelists some questions that are focused in their areas of expertise. And then panelists, I also want you all to know that you have the opportunity to respond to the questions that may be meant for the other panelists. And folks who are in the audience, please feel free to direct your questions into the chat, and we will have time for Q&A at the end of the session. So Ji-Hye, I'm going to start with you, if that sounds okay. So my first question for you is really about telling me a little bit. Actually, this is for all panelists, so maybe we'll do a round robin real quickly, 1 to 2 minutes. What is your background in and general understanding of AI in relation to your daily work and operations, and how is it that you use AI? So just kind of a broad summary, and Ji-Hye, we'll start with you.
Sure. So with respect to our company in the background, we've been working on document understanding in some way, shape, or form since about 2014, 2015. And so in terms of what we do on a daily basis, we use a lot of natural language processing, information extraction, computer vision to really understand documents the way a person would. That would be textually, visually, semantically. and then package that data so we can do something else with it. So in a sense, we're kind of creating Legos to help people build other types of applications. And so our largest customers are in the Air Force and DoD. And what they're trying to do are develop VR assistance, training for maintenance for aircraft maintainers. And so all these applications that they need, whether they're tablets or headsets or anything like that, all of that information has to be packaged in a way that's easily usable of that. So that's kind of what we do on a daily basis in the large. And then, I'm sure everybody has been playing around with these large language models. So we're trying to figure out where that's going to fit in with us in terms of what we can do internally to increase our efficiencies and then potentially also use it for the customers.
Great, thank you. Pepe, same question for you. How do you use and interact with AI on a daily basis?
Sure, and thank you. So I work for a company that is more than 110 years old. So we have been at the center of different inflection points in history, from landing a man in the moon to the laser surgery for eye or the barcode. But AI as well has been a pillar for us since, well, a long time ago. So we are very familiar with this journey. You may be familiar as well with a show that happened more or less like 13 years ago, which was the Jeopardy. So Watson was an IBM brand compete with Jeopardy, and they use what was the beginning of this one of the beginning of this journey. So we use AI. Internally, of course, through different use cases, as well as externally, which is the beauty of working in a company like IBM, that we help other clients to adopt AI. We have seen AI adoption doubling pretty much since 2017. And we have seen clients like Bradesco, who has been automated their inquiries. So they receive more than 300,000 inquiries a month, and they have been automating these processes with a very good percentage of accuracy and so on. So we have different models, from chatbots to analytics tools to asset management. So at the end of the day, we try to foster this adoption on AI in our clients. So that is pretty much the idea. And AI is reshaping what productivity means. The question is, will you take advantage of it?
Thank you, Pepe. Cole, same question.
All right, yeah, thank you for having me. So for me, I actually got into working with AI and everything from the artistic end. As it said earlier, I'm a composer, so I was first trying to find more interesting ways of expressing the ideas that I had. Eventually, I moved to sort of using computers as collaborators, so something where I would start some sort of automated process while I'm doing something else and interact with it live. And then eventually that led me to when I got into industry at the Amper Music, where my goal was to basically take what I was doing before and remove myself from the loop, so have it be completely autonomous. So during my entire time in industry, it's really been focused on taking AI as a product, trying to make it solve some specific use case that's a pain point for someone. So for Amper Music, the idea is if you would otherwise be using stock music, there's some issues with that of it's usually very difficult to search from or search through. So instead of searching for it, you should just tell us what you want. Editing the music once you get it is something that typically people using stock music are working on video. They're not audio editors, and honestly, no one likes editing audio. So you don't have to edit it. You just tell us how much, how long you want, where you want things to happen, and we do it for you. And we're also able to do it extremely fast. It can be personalized like that, and so on. Further, my time at Shutterstock was a lot of sort of semantic search and multimodality. So being able to connect image and music and text and other things, be able to search for one with the other, find related music to a video, be able to find images with images and things like that. And then finally at Bluecore, it's been more on what you would, I guess, traditionally think of, which is more recommendation systems and things like that. So sort of all across the gamut of trying to allow AI mostly to help personalize, help give something for you that is what you are looking for, and ultimately improves your experience.
Wonderful. Thank you, Cole. Benjamin, last but not least, tell us a little bit about how AI interacts with your daily life.
Sure. Thanks for having me. So I'm a reporter, so I don't use it for business capacities for the most part, but I have used, text to image, text to video, recommendation systems, search algorithms and stuff like that around AGI and whatnot. And so one thing that goes into my work is looking at how businesses are utilizing this in a ton of different use cases, and also how the industry is interacting with regulators, interacting with business, even interacting with themselves. So that's really where my focus goes in terms of trying to take that 10,000-foot view about where this is going and how it's being used in a wide array of use cases.
Great, wonderful, thank you. And again, I think what's just something to highlight is I think the range of backgrounds coming at this one topic, which I think is really, really excellent. So Jiha, I'm going to start with a more specific question to you. I'll give you the opportunity to answer, and then panelists, please feel free. If there's something in particular Jiha says that is of interest, please feel free to comment. So thinking about how businesses are using AI to increase efficiency while maintaining a workforce, can you tell us a little bit more about how AI is used in sales, marketing, and customer experience?
Sure. So I'll just use us as an example. So we, it runs the gamut, and certainly ChatGPT has kind of opened the floodgates for all of this. So internally, we use it in two ways: from the marketing sense, where it's very good at generating copy edit drafts for like press releases, white paper, simple marketing type applications. So we've certainly used it for that, and it's very successful there. It does need some editing to check for correctness. And then the other place that we use it internally is, and it's still under some experimentation, is really as a pair programming buddy. It's good at, surprisingly good at code. And we use it in two ways. One is getting it obviously to generate some snippets of code that we can use pretty much for us on non-mission critical or non-sensitive type of code. And then also as an interrogative, right? So it's saying, hey, what kind of libraries can I use to help me solve this problem? And in most cases, it's been pretty good there, but it has made some stuff up. So there's this constant verification of whether it's what it's telling you is accurate. And so it's been helpful in that sense. The interesting thing for us is where it fails. And for us, because of the nature of the technical material that we're looking at, the tech data for these aircraft maintenance use cases in particular, you have to be correct. You can't hallucinate. You can't make some stuff up. You have to follow the procedures much in the same, exactly as it's written, that otherwise you get in trouble. My CTO likes to joke, they're called technical orders, not technical options. So you have to really follow them. And it's really sensitive to input conditions for us for things like that. So we really can't trust it there. And so we're constantly looking at that and seeing what can we do there. So the experiments there haven't been fantastic. And then the other place where it's been a little hit and miss for us is when we look at annotation and those types of data labeling tasks. Again, things like visual annotation, where we've tried Stable Diffusion, some of these other open source models, they just act a little crazy. So I would say it's pretty good for things that you don't have to have 100% trust is a little bit relative here, but where you have to have a high degree of accuracy and trust, it's not great for us there. But for other places where we can use it to brainstorm, come up with new text that we don't have to be as careful about, or use it as a place where if you get stuck and you need to generate ideas as a buddy, it's been great there.
Wonderful, thank you. So I'll open it up for other panelists thinking of examples of how you have seen or heard of how AI has been used in sales, marketing, or customer experience. I'd be curious if anyone has anything to add.
I agree with what you said on experimentation. And I would say, imagine this. I mean, when you talk about AI, it may sound sometimes very complex. And what is going on right now in the world is that complexity is being reduced more and more. So the technology is more and more available to everybody. Imagine this. So you are sitting at your desk, and then you can ask AI to do something for you, like create a new purchase order or maybe a new job requisition. So those are things of activities that could be recurrent, that may be boring, that you can automate, and you can have someone doing that for you. talking about marketing specifically, for example, Amazon is doing that, right? So when we all have read those reviews. Sometimes those reviews are influencing the way that we purchase something, right? So why don't, instead of having a person reading all those reviews and try to understand what is the feeling about a specific product, why don't we have AI reading all that and giving us a verdict, right? Other example, if you like platforms like Salesforce, Salesforce recently announced AI Cloud, no, which is a platform that is consolidating many of their products, like Einstein, Data Cloud, MuleSoft, etc. And the idea is that we can foster those capabilities and put those to work into business operations. So at the end, it is like that. It's like, how can you make productivity better? How can you use that in your benefit? And everything starts with trying to fix a problem.
Yeah, I think that as an approach makes sense. Cole, Benjamin, anything to add before we go to the next question?
I wanted to chime in on the first thing that Pepe said there, which is like, whenever I talk about things like text to image or language models and things like that, I fundamentally start by saying that they are a user experience improvement above everything else, because it really, the idea of being able to do these things has been around before. Quality is getting better, of course, but we've never been able to like use them as fluently as we can right now. So for things that used to be impossible, that might have been possible before ChatGPT, are just way easier to do now. So they seem much more possible. And that's going to expand into lots of different areas as we deal with some of the issues of like incorrect output and not following directions explicitly as well.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in briefly to kind of add that I think what's really important when thinking about how businesses use this is, what is the discrete purpose that you're going to be using it for, right? It is not a catch-all for anything, really. Like, these systems are fascinating, but, you know, they do still have a lot of flaws. And I kind of joke that, you know, I've covered crypto, I covered the boom of the last few years. I've been reporting on AI since 2017 or so. So, you know, to your point, Cole, it's been around for a while. It's just that user-facing direction that's getting a lot easier for everybody to engage with, which comes with its own set of challenges and concerns. But, you know, based on the pitches in my inbox, it really seemed like AI is the new crypto, in the sense of where all of a sudden, like as of November of last year, everybody was like, oh, I have AI products. Like, absolutely, look at this new company. And so when thinking about how you're going to incorporate it into your business, I would caution against that and really focus on what is the, you know, 1 to 2 to 3 problems it might solve versus being the basis for a company itself.
Yeah, Benjamin, I think that's so well said. In other words, that it is still a tool or a technique. It is not a panacea to cure all of our ills. Pepe, I'm putting you on the spot again. You mentioned kind of some of the opportunities where it has been really, really effective, and Jihei kind of alluded to some of the areas where there are still some problems. Are there any particular failed or negative attempts where we've seen AI try to be applied that really has not been successful?
Not successful. Well, there are many examples out there. I try to cover more what has been successful, and I can share some examples. I would like to piggyback on Benjamin's comment. So when you talk about AI, well, let's try to fix one problem, right? Focus on the problem. At the end, I have seen a lot of digital transformations failing, and that is something that it doesn't require necessarily AI. So with AI, we are enhancing these possibilities, and we are growing those possibilities. So also the failure can be exponential. Talking about failure, let me see. We have seen, for example, some wrong answers. Well, something going like from wrong answers to very wrong answers. And we have seen, for example, some AI systems falling in love with journalists. So that's also something that happened not that long ago. And at the end of the day, it's like when you're talking about building models, it is very important that you can have very clear what you want to accomplish with something, that you can have good data. No, everything starts with data, so it's important you can have good data you can leverage, that you can have the time to train those models, as well as that you can have opportunity to test. So before going live with anything, that you can be sure that there will be no craziness around the models that you have, and that you can also have a governance layer. So that can help you as well to control what's going on. Now, flipping a little bit on the positive side, because at the end, it's AI is something that can inspire us all. So I don't know I cannot see the audience, but do we have any Tom Cruise Top Gun fans here? I'm sure. Yeah, sure we may. So this movie was recently released, not the Maverick movie. But what happened, and the example I have with AI is this. So in 2017, Val Kilmer which is the person who plays the Iceman in the film. He unfortunately was diagnosed with cancer on his throat, and that limit his ability to talk. So what happened is this company called Sonantic that was recently acquired by Spotify. They use Val Kilmer's voice, all the records that they have through movies and records, as well as his son's voice, which was very similar. And they built a model, and at the end, they were able to build all the dialogues that you can see today as part of the movie. So that is a very interesting use case on AI. And Spotify, just talking about that, they are using AI to curate and design playlists for us listeners, if we use that. And the same happened with other similar companies. In media, it's broadly used. We can use, this to generate characters for movies, create production sets, like what happened with The Mandalorian. So that was something also that was very inspiring. Removing the noise, and especially on the music, and as well as what we can see on forums and movies, hyper personalization, etc. I touch one page on AI and media for developers, for example. So there's some helping. AI is helping developers to be better on the way they code. GitHub, for example, they release a product that is called Copilot, and it is an AI-empowered tool that is helping developers to create better code, basically. And we have seen that in our home as well at IBM. So there is a product that we call Watson Code Assistant, and we have seen 10 times more productive people when they write code. So these kind of things can help us to really improve the way that we operate. More examples in agriculture, for example, and geography, we partnered with NASA. And the idea here is that we can understand and use maps and historic information so we can forecast what are the possibilities of catching a fire or getting flood, etc. So if you are planning a new development, if you are in a fire department, you can also plan better your response in the case of an event. More examples in asset management. We use this we use a tool that is called Maximo to help and in collaboration with other technologies like drones to do visual inspection and automate that visual inspection. And we have seen that with very good results that are pretty much double digits in terms of improvements compared to what manual work could do when you inspect a bridge, for example. So those are just some examples on how we can leverage. I try to cover different industries, but you can name it, right? Summarization, question answerings, text insights, code assistant, chatbots, classifications. The universe is ours. And at the end, what I will invite and reiterate to everybody is focus on the problem, and then go one by one and try to get a view or build a model that can help you resolve that specifically and get inspired.
Yeah. Thank you, Pepe. I do want to ask kind of a targeted question, and then I want to open it up for folks. Is Cole, thinking about kind of your role from an instructional and educational standpoint, are there any specific kind of jobs or skill sets or even approaches that you feel like are most ready for AI training?
Yeah, so the short answer is yes, everything, but it's for different reasons. So on the one, like, you have the understanding what this is and what it's capable of, and like I mean that in a very broad sense too, where like in order to be able to find a problem to apply it for, you have to get over the assumption that it can do anything, because like it can, but it can't. You have to know how to actually approach this. You need to not come in and say like, how do I use AI to 10x my revenue? You have to figure out a thing that you can use AI for that itself can help you do that if that's what your goal is. On the other hand, there's the people of actually like making these things, maintaining them, monitoring them. And so that's going to be more like your software engineers, your data scientists, and things like that, understanding really like how these things fundamentally work, how to like improve them, how to keep an eye on them. Like the idea of in the past, when you had just say like a classifier that outputs like it's a probability that it's a cat, that's sort of like easier to wrap your head around how you say if that's right or not. When you're outputting arbitrary text or full images or things like that, how do we actually like make sure that that is correct or what we asked for or not? So having to develop systems around that and the people that can think about those problems and apply it to very different domains. So like language, vision, there's like a lot of neuroscientists that come into things. I actually teach people sort of I mean, my background again was from music. I've taught other musicians to do this. I have some students that are from finance applying this to problems there. I have a student that's a marine biologist applying data science and AI to her domain also. So really it comes down to, like, again, the two sides of like understanding it broadly and knowing what it can or can't do, and then understanding it more specifically if you're in one of the fields to actually like work on this, deploy it, maintain it.
So Benjamin, I want to shift to you for this first round of questions, and then I want to continue to do some follow-ups. So can you tell us a little bit from, obviously from a journalistic perspective, is what threats do we see related to AI as it relates to cybersecurity, generative data bias, and misinformation, and how might this intersect with folks who are running their own business or are employees of other businesses?
Yeah, I think there's a lot. And I think a big reason that's happening is because of how it's available to everybody right now for kind of however they want to use it. Even some of the more, some of the bigger models, thinking about ChatGPT and others that, do have parameters that are set up for limiting what they can generate and putting up those guardrails. They're open source models people can use just however they like. So it's not just saying that it's one or two companies doing this. Like, there are models that are proliferating really, really fast, and they can be trained on different kinds of data that's not as carefully constructed as companies that have been working on this a long time. And that presents a bunch of different challenges. We see issues, at least in terms of, I'll think about the coding aspect here right now. We have companies like Apple, we have companies like Samsung and others that have banned their employees from using generative AI tools because they can input sensitive data. I think it was a Samsung employee that kind of inadvertently put in really sensitive code. And those models can ingest that and learn off of that and then potentially regurgitate it to somebody else completely unrelated to the company itself. So it's being very aware of what you're putting in and exactly who all is going to have access to these models and the data that is used. And that goes to other issues around privacy and stuff like that. For example, Italy, when ChatGPT tried to launch there, Italy banned it over privacy concerns around EU privacy regulations. OpenAI, which makes ChatGPT, kind of cleaned up some systems there, and there's an opt-out now for your data being used and what's being gathered. But these are all the kinds of considerations, particularly if you're operating beyond just the continental United States, about what you might be dealing with, both in terms of potential lawsuits, in terms of some data privacy issues and other things. In addition to that, there is this misinformation aspect in terms of researchers I've spoken with and reporting I've been doing. The thing is, AI does stuff really, really fast. It's that scalable aspect that Pepe was talking about. And that means that, it's not just somebody writing one tweet that could be saying something wrong. It means that, if you're potentially a state actor or something like that, you can just generate blog posts, you can generate emails, you can generate things at a scale much quicker than any individual could do. So those are some of the things that come, to me top of mind. I think in terms of, I saw the poll and I saw the majority of people here were kind of had a beginning acquaintance with AI, and, kind of bouncing off a question that was asked earlier is just, everybody here should be able to familiarize themselves kind of with just the basic tenets of how these things are used, right? It is use training data from the internet, large language models. I think it was GPT-3 that ingested information up to 2021 that was available online. And then so it trains off of all these different things. And when we're thinking about AI in terms of the risks and the benefits, and it might be a bit simplistic, my fellow panelists, feel free to jump in and correct me on this one, but it's a really, really, really good next word predictor in a lot of cases, or it's kind of a funhouse mirror reflection of ourselves. So, when we talk about it as artificial intelligence, it's smart at certain tasks that it can do, but it's not sentient. I know there's been sort of maybe some kerfuffles at Google and other places around people that might believe otherwise, but it really is reflecting the world that we've showed it back at us. So that comes with benefits and also a lot of problems because we're humans, we're flawed, right? We're not infallible. So that's a little bit of a long-winded answer, but that's sort of the range of concerns that I see in the reporting I do and talking to regulators, businesses, individuals that have looked at this for years.
Yeah, no, I think that's really well summarized. Panelists, any responses to anything Benjamin said, or even thinking about this intersection of some of the challenges related to the power of AI as a tool? Go ahead, Jihei, please.
Oh, yeah, no, I wanted to definitely echo off what Benjamin said. So many complex issues there. I mean, one, right now, it's not really understanding what it's reading. It doesn't really understand the way a person does what it's generating. As he said, it's a next word predictor. A lot of these are built upon layers and layers of these the model that's going to figure out what's going to come next. But there's no like kind of, super intelligence behind it at this point, right? So that kind of answers one of the earlier questions is, is it really comprehending? Is it really understanding? And it's no. It's been trained on a lot of material that that has been written by humans so that it makes a lot of sense. But does it really understand? No. And so, hallucination is one of those symptoms. And then the other issue, and he brought up so many other important ones, is the privacy issue, which very important across the board, not just the EU. How we they've got certainly stronger regulations with GDPR. Here, I don't know what it's going to take shape as yet. And Sam, I can't remember his last name, the OpenAI CEO, he's been on the Hill asking for regulation. So hopefully he'll be the good guy here. Well, which that remains to be seen. But privacy is a huge issue. And then a much deeper issue is we don't really know how to introspect in some of these models that are, ginormous. We don't really know what it's quite doing. And so this idea of if it's being fair, what the bias is, these are all major issues that we don't have a good answer for yet. And, places like DARPA that are trying to detect false information, disinformation, misinformation, that's still, kind of it's in early stages. And so I think a lot of this is going to depend on us as people, as a society, kind of learning how to use these tools ourselves, but also learning and teaching kids in school, adults, how to recognize false information. And that's an extremely tall order, especially in this kind of polarized society that we're living in right now. So I don't know what the answers are, but these are major issues that have to be tackled, not just through education, but policy and regulation.
Yeah, agreed. Pepe, please.
If I may, yeah, I agree on that. And I think that this is also not only a technical question, but it's also a human question. So how we as humans can use this power to create something good, and how we regulate that. How do we align all that is going on around us so we can analyze what core values we have and care about, and then build models that can replicate that. If you analyze histories, right, I'm sure that AI is going to be democratized at some point. I'm sure, look, the analogy I have on this is, we have electricity, right? Electricity is powerful, and we create the mechanisms to control it, to regulate it, and so on. The same with nuclear power, the same with other technologies. So at the end of the day, this is something that is going to happen some way or another, but we need to find a way to humanize this, to go back to the core of what we can do with all this power. And it is like with Uncle Ben, no? It's like with great power comes great responsibility. So at the end, it's something like this. So you have the technology, and everybody's using it more and more. So how can you use it to do the better good?
Yeah, well said. Cole, anything to add, or should we move on to the next question?
Yeah, I guess a couple things. So just to make it really clear, I'll rephrase something that has been said, I think, by everyone at this point. Like, AI, a lot of times, is basically like a megaphone. It's not necessarily the source of the problem. The source of the problems that we're talking about is ultimately the data, and the source of the data is people. So it's a question of like, what is available for it to have? What do we actually train it on? Everyone, we might try to be as non-biased as possible on different things, but things slip in. We're people. So that's like one part of this. And then another part that's more on sort of the technical side that we don't have great answers for is this idea of like alignment, or like what the thing you're training it on isn't what you actually want it to do. So to the whole idea of language models are next word predictors, that is absolutely correct. They are trained to predict the next thing in a sequence. They're not trained to answer your questions in a chat format. That's something we ask them to do, and we sort of like trick ourselves into believing that's what it's doing. But it's actually, when it's being trained, when all of the numbers are like crunching, it's doing something else. And so like one of the problems is we don't know how different the task we're having it actually do is compared to what we want it to do, and what sort of complexities can happen sort of in the medium.
Yeah, that's really well said. Actually, this kind of makes, and Jeha, I'm gonna guess that this maybe is relevant, but you've done a fair amount of work with the Air Force in terms of training and their development. Can you speak at all to how you've integrated AI into that particular use case of workforce training?
So in terms of the large language models, ChatGPT, certainly there's some experimentation, but it's not really deployed at scale anywhere in the DoD. I mean, I think everybody's looking at it, but you have to go through a lot of compliance and authorization before anything like that can be used, especially in highly sensitive areas. It doesn't have to be secret or a class. It's just this process that you have to go through to get it on in a fielded situation. What we have been using, and it's been beneficial for us, is that a lot of the technical data, the source data that we're looking at in terms of this complex document understanding, this technical instruction, technical manual type understanding, a lot of it isn't. ChatGPT is really not. It's not a lot of stuff that it's looked at, and so for us, it's been using both open source, proprietary developed natural language processing, more of the classic, let's say, type of text analysis to really use this data. And so that's kind of where we are in terms of the technical aspect of our work with the Air Force. But the data itself, because it's so sensitive, because it's so different, and there's so much of it, we've had to use, I would say, different techniques to have to address those problems. So did I answer that question, Christine? Because I feel like there were a lot of layers to what.
No, you did. And I think what you kind of have alluded to is kind of rephrasing what we've talked about is AI as a tool does not exist in a vacuum, right? It's coming up all against all of these policy and legislative and privacy issues. And I think that's really, really well said. Let me see does anyone have anything else to add in particular to any kind of use cases or anything that you feel like maybe is something we haven't talked about yet?
Just jumping in with one final concern that I think doesn't get talked about a whole lot in terms of this, and particularly if you're thinking about how to use this in your business, I think it's really important. These tools are incredibly expensive to run. Like, that's another thing. I think there's estimations that, OpenAI is spending about over $100,000 or more a day running, kind of questions and everything else for ChatGPT. So there's a huge cost element to all of this in running these sorts of tools that I think should be taken into consideration. So that's just one thing I don't often see discussed, particularly if you're thinking about how to incorporate it into a business model itself.
Yeah, I can piggyback off of that too, because that's absolutely important. Of course, like the business parallel to that is if it's bringing in more money than I'm spending, then I'm good. There is a second cost to this, which is the carbon footprint, because these things run a lot of compute, burn a lot of energy, and generate a lot of heat and extra greenhouse gases too. It's a thing that's being worked on by a lot of companies, like more efficient compute and everything to address like the energy cost, the speed, and reducing the carbon footprint, but it is very much a concern.
Yeah. So then thinking a little bit, Pepe, please go ahead. Didn't mean to cut you off.
I was gonna say something about. I saw one of the questions as well in the chat about cost, and how can you convince and get the buy-in. So this is like every other business model, like every other project or implementation, right? So you need to understand what is the return of investment that you can have with this, and analyze the cost that is behind. So as I mentioned, the idea is, or with technology improving, this will be more accessible with time. But yeah, you're right. At the beginning, it can be expensive. It can be not accessible to everybody. But I'm sure that as we progress, and we're progressing fast, this is going to be more and more. So keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on what this can do for you, and then we'll put everything into consideration before you make a decision.
Great. Yeah, agreed. Thank you. So then a lot of what we've talked about so far has really been about generative AI. Can folks speak at all to, are there other opportunities within AI as a means of improving business efficacy or other related improvements?
Well, I'll just go ahead and say that, like AI itself is nothing new, as I think everyone here has said at this point. Generative AI, specifically the the really easy to use versions of this with high quality output. That is the new thing. But all of the things from before, like one of the best uses of things since a long time has been classification. So being able to pull information out of, like, is this picture a dog or a cat, or is the person writing this tweet happy or sad or whatever, things like that. Those are, they have been and continue to be great use cases for things. And as things generally improve, like now we're seeing more stuff like, improving cancer detection rates by looking at images and things like that. Nothing generative about it. It's just purely, the models are advancing to have higher accuracy. We're getting more data because there are lots of privacy concerns there too. So it's sort of like a confluence of everything. Like the technology gets better, the data gets better, and then hopefully everyone's lives get better.
Yeah, absolutely. I know in my reporting, I've covered a couple different companies that have been working on that sort of looking at cellular scans and other stuff like that and identifying abnormalities. And that's really because beyond generating anything, AI is really good at pattern recognition. And so I've talked to companies that are using it for fraud detection, other stuff like that. And, I saw a question in the chat. I think that was, well, what's the difference between machine learning and AI? And it's worth pointing out there are tons of different models of machine learning. Like it is not a one size fits all thing. There are different, modalities of this being explored every single day. So it's worth thinking about that, and that AI is not just a standalone single entity, right? It's a bunch of different training methods, a bunch of different things that really just get caught up in this generalized term AI, which we can debate about what the efficacy of that in and of itself is. So there are things that go well beyond, context or content generation. The pattern recognition is the big one I've seen. But again, you run into those issues, speaking about DARPA, right? DARPA has been looking at explainability in terms of AI since, even before 2017, I think, but it's really, we put in these inputs, goes into a black box, spits something else out. It's a decision or something. And so being able to have it go back and explain why it did a thing that it did is something we're still struggling with in a lot of different cases. And so, beyond image generation or text generation, that's another problem that we're starting to run up against and is really important when we're looking at things like, fraud detection or stuff like that, or deviation from generalized behaviors, because that can have implications for people downstream when they don't even know they're interacting with an AI system. So
anything else to add? One of the things that popped into my head was manufacturing and AI's involvement potentially in improving manufacturing. Is that something that folks have heard anything about, or is that an area that perhaps is too simplistic for the technology as it currently exists? Any thoughts about that?
So we're kind of adjacent to manufacturing, where we look at maintenance and repairs. So I'll just take a little bit of a stab at that. So, multiple use cases in manufacturing, and I'm certainly going to bias this from the aircraft perspective, but inspection, visual inspection, trying to look for corrosion, problems, issues. So it's pretty good at that. You don't necessarily need ChatGPT for something like that. And then I think I saw something in the question box about, can I use ChatGPT in my manufacturing floor to, let's say, generate work instructions or operating procedures? And certainly that's a valid use case. I think it really depends on how critical those instructions are, and whether it's getting checked by a person at the end to make sure that those are truly instructions or procedures that can be followed. And then certainly putting sort of some inspection or vision even on the operator and what they're working on to see if they're doing the procedures and steps correctly. So those again are things that we're dealing with and that we're looking at it from aircraft perspective, the aircraft side of it. But that I would say that that's touching into some of the manufacturing space. But there's so many applications that it's very important to see what the operator is doing and whether the operator is following the steps correctly. And some of it can be done kind of easily right now, and some of it is still in the research phases.
Thank you. Cole, it looked like you did unmute. Anything to add?
I was going to basically say a more general version of what Jihei just said, but yeah, like the also for especially like robotic-based assembly lines, which is a thing that has been around for a while. A thing that I hear a lot about is being able to detect when a part of a robot will break so that you can preemptively order it and then get it repaired so there's less downtime is like one area. And then something that's also a form of manufacturing, there was the whole with Google DeepMind's AlphaFold of being able to really accurately do protein folding and predict new structures of chemicals for, say, like drug discovery. You can apply the same thing in a lot of ways to like material sciences and everything as well. So like anytime where you're trying to do, again, it's like a pattern recognition thing, it's like having to deal with a lot of constraint solving. That's something that, not specifically generative, but has definitely been looked at with AI.
I want to just mention something. So I think that when you talk about manufacturing, it depends on the case that you wanna make. At the end of the day, is if you wanna improve efficiency, if you wanna do, what is the goal that you are seeking? I think that's something that AI is good. It's at eliminating repetitive activities. So something that you can use in that end, well, quality improvements, recommendation engines. There are many things that AI can do for a person in the shop floor. Also, depending on where you are, right? Like maybe in human resources as well. No, maybe you are there. We have seen a significant reduction in time spent on reduced cutting manual and repetitive activities. So that's something that IBM has been investing, no, in terms of human resources. I have seen also what Cole mentioned about in terms of supply chain. So how can you design a seed? No, for example, when you're talking about agriculture, how can you design a better seed for, I don't know, plantation in Canada or plantation somewhere else that it can be harder to grow? So you can genetically modify. You can use artificial intelligence to start getting formulas and test. No? I have seen a good collaboration with other technologies like IoT. No, in this case of the planting a seed, yeah, but how are you monitoring the growth and so on? So that's something that you can do through Internet of Things or mobile devices and so on. So you can track all the supply chain all along, use other technologies like blockchain to identify, get everything on ledgers and so on. So the possibilities are good, but again, I would like to say it is very important that you can understand what you are seeking, what is your goal, and then you can shape what technology. Technology needs to follow business, not the other way around.
Sure. Yeah, no, well said. Benjamin, anything to add, or am I okay to go to the next question?
Manufacturing is not something I reported on deeply, so I don't want to speculate. I'll leave that to my fellow panelists.
No, I know. I appreciate that. So in one of the challenges we had talked a little bit about, and I think the panelists have really articulated this so well, in that the data that we are training these algorithms on, right, are produced by humans, and so to some extent they have these biases and these issues. When an AI learns something, is there a process for it unlearning? Maybe more from the technological perspective, can we talk a little bit about what that process might look like? In other words, when we have identified a bias or some type of issue, how do we assist the AI in unlearning something that is problematic?
So there are different thoughts on this and everything. So the very gross generalization about how these things are. You start out with a model that's basically random nonsense, and then you nudge it in a direction. And you do that by showing it examples and it's updating. Also, a caveat, they only learn when they're in a sort of training setting, when they're usually like deployed, like ChatGPT. It's not actively learning. OpenAI is storing your data and using it to train offline, but it's not in the process of you interacting with it learning directly. For getting it to unlearn something, you can, in some cases, it unlearns things that you don't want it to unlearn. This is something called catastrophic forgetting. If you start training it more on something, you don't give it examples of something you saw before, it will basically just stop being able to do the previous thing in a lot of cases. But it won't like completely necessarily go away. So you can show it more of what you want, but that doesn't necessarily get rid of its ability to do the thing you don't want. There's always like some probability that it will happen. That probability just goes down.
Understood. Anything else to add there? Jihei, looks like that was a question that you were interested in answering as well, I think.
I think I actually clicked the button by accident.
Oh,
no, but it's all good. I mean, I think that was it's a very it's a very layered question. And, that I think, probably go back to a multiple definition of what unlearn means. But I definitely echo what Cole said. I mean, right now, our best tool to deal with this bad prediction is to give it better annotated data, which is not cheap. You still have to it's a lot of time and expense, even if you automate that annotation process. It's just not a very fast, cheap endeavor.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
If I may just cover, there are three pillars or three big pillars that we are focusing our AI business right now. So one is the data. So how can you clean the data? How can you make like a very good fuel, right? Like it's been said that the data is the new fuel, but like oil today, it needs to be refined. It can be dirty, it can be misunderstood, like pollute the world and so on. So we need to be very careful with data. Number two is about models. So yes, ChatGPT is one of these models, but there are many out there. And the idea is that every company can build their own model so it can be more customized to their needs. So how you can get more and more models so the responses that you get can be more accurate. And number three is the governance. So how can you make sure that you have control over the data? How can you be sure that you trust the platform that you are in? And well, everything started with picking, well, what works for your company, what works for you. If open source elements work, well, fantastic, right? Like keep using, but you can understand what are the cons, the pros and cons that this technology can have, or if you decide to keep everything in house, no? And then well you balance everything. But yeah, those three pillars I believe that are centric in terms of understanding how AI can help to your business.
Yeah, well said. So then in taking a little bit of a step back and maybe, asking a question that is relatively broad, obviously, right, all of us here, I will speak and say we are all adults, right, existing in adulthood. When we think about AI getting into the K through 12 system or even into colleges, and Cole, I know, you're educating on this. Do folks have maybe any examples of places where AI is really being incorporated as an educational tool? What might that look like? And then in thinking almost blue sky, what might it mean for kids, and young adults to get introduced to this technology at an early age? I would love to hear from folks about kind of their thoughts. Does anyone want to start us off?
Well, I guess I can go first. Yeah. So I mean, on the one hand, even beyond AI, there's been a push for a long time to get like computers programming specifically into schools, into younger grades earlier on, because computers aren't going away. You're going to have to interact with them. And the more you understand them, the more you can do things with them, the better you're going to be. And AI is going to be like a similar way. There's this fun situation right now that I think everyone's aware of with specifically ChatGPT of like schools and cheating and things like that. So on the one hand, we want people to like use these things, understand what they can and can't do, all of the incorrect things they can output. And also at the same time, we want like academic integrity and being able to think and learn to do things yourselves and not just saying, well, it's done, right? So it's a balance of those things. And that really comes down to having to think of ways of introducing this to students in productive ways, and not just like, here, it can write essays for you. But an example that I heard recently at a conference, someone was saying like, for certain tests, like often you want to have like a passage and like, let's say the people need to figure out like things that are wrong with it. Now, if as a teacher I want to do that, maybe I can come up with like 3 variants of like a passage that I write and I make errors in and have people do it. But that's only going to be like 3 versions. You can use ChatGPT, give it like a base passage and ask it to make it worse, make it wrong. And then, so then you have personalized tests like this, and you already know what it came from, what it should, what it was made wrong about it, what is correct about it. And that helps you with grading it. So just back to personalization, being able to like use it for like to expand what you're giving to people rather than having it just be something that they use to solve the problem. That's one application of this.
I wanted to tag off a little bit about what Cole said like my kids are still in, well, one's out, but one is still in school. And I definitely want them to understand and be able to, understand to these skills, pick up these skills. But I think one of the things that my kids don't get right now, and I certainly didn't in K through 12, was what kind of critical thinking skills and exercises can we teach kids pretty early on and throughout, so that no matter what the technology is or how it's going to change, they have a non-technical skill set that can be applied to understand and use these technologies. Because learning how to code is one thing, that becomes prompt engineering and all these other things, but is it really teaching them any kind of critical skills to understand bias, fairness, any of these sort of dangers about misinformation, et cetera, or how I should even interact with technology? So I think something like that would be really important. And I haven't really seen anything structured like that. I'm not in the education space, so I'm sure somebody's addressing this, but I think something like that, not just a single class, but really in early and reinforced throughout the K through 12 system.
Yeah.
I think I'm sorry. Go ahead, Benjamin. Oh, okay. Well, just very quickly. So I think we can cover this from two angles. So one as a student, and the other as the academia, right? As the instruction of the teachers. I think there's a very good opportunity there. So just very quickly, as a student, I think it's very exciting. I remember when I was in high school, we survived I used the Microsoft Encarta a lot. So when I was trying to get like articles and things, so I used that. And then we get the internet, and then we get the Googles, and then we get, so at the end of the day, all the technology is going to be there for us. And it goes back to the concept that Cole was saying, hey, do we trust our students? Do we trust what we're doing? And do we have the right frameworks? One example is what Duolingo is doing. And this is a language learning platform. They actually, we all learn differently. No, there are people who is more visual. They're like more, you need to touch something, or they like more use the ear to learn. Well, Duolingo is using and is personalizing the learning experience through algorithms. And I think that's a way that you can enhance the education. And back to on that end, I think is very interesting. And as academy represents an opportunity, because we can use the artificial intelligence to enhance the experience, the learning experience, more than ban it, more than forbid things to happen, because sooner or later things are going to happen, and people will find a way to be better and improve. So better to use this technology that is available and try to blend and try to merge that with our teaching experience, so our students can get the best of it.
Yeah, I'll be super brief. And I can never think of Duolingo without thinking about the really aggressive owl, and I'm worried about what AI might do to that. But anyway, no, I think that when we look at how, kids K through 12 are using technology in ways that we didn't when we were younger, they're being introduced to it at younger and younger ages. And I think that, media and technological literacy courses, or just having an understanding of that, is a huge part of growing up in the world today. And so I think that it is important to have these tools be introduced to kids as they are younger, along with realizations about all the limitations of them too. I think that's incredibly important. There's already industries that are being sprung up around, being able to detect AI generated text and stuff like that to kind of preempt against some of those cheating things that were mentioned. There's also, some professors that are having their students write essays using ChatGPT as a way to show that they can be inaccurate. And then they have to kind of go back and look at where these inaccuracies were to just illustrate the vulnerability points. And I think that's also important. But I do think it's worthwhile because, on top of all these, again, these discrete sorts of things, I think that we don't yet know what the most interesting, maybe best use cases of AI will be going forward. And I think that, as people start to imagine and iterate upon it and how they might use it, we're going to see that in younger and younger people. And that comes from being aware of these technologies and their capabilities and failures, as you start to grow in the world. So, again, I don't think this is a thing you can put, that you can stop. I don't think you can ban it. It's already out there. It's a reality. There's going to be ways to access it, even if certain states ban it, or, the US bans it, or countries do. So just having people grow alongside it with an understanding of its limitations is going to be the biggest part of this going forward. So certainly not keeping it out of schools, but, really getting people to think about where it can be applied and where maybe it shouldn't.
Yeah, I think that's really, really well said. And thinking a little bit about Benjamin, one of the things you just mentioned that I, similarly, I'm a professor at Stony Brook. I've heard of colleagues doing this. Do folks have, when I ask the question, what role might AI play in innovation? And that can be from the perspective of technology, but also from a business perspective. What are some things that folks think about when we think of AI as a tool for innovation, or maybe even some examples of places where it really has been a powerful tool for innovation?
I mean, I think just the ideation process, right? Like if you're stuck, it kind of spitting things at you as a brainstorming mechanism is one of the ones that I think I've most commonly seen, and also seems to be the case in which it's not really doing harm. You're just kind of using it as a way to like put things back and forth. That's the one I most commonly see. But in terms of innovation in business models and things like that, personally, I'm just less clear on that. So I'll, put that to the other panelists.
That's a tough question, Christine. Yeah, we definitely use it for ideation internally for sure. Whether it's and certainly, automation, it's a force multiplier, but whether it's helping us be truly innovative and creative, I don't know. I think it's still part of that iterative process where you need people and lots of ideas and mistakes and in the ideas and you're running through that iterative process. I'm just trying to figure out like if there are ways that besides, it bouncing ideas off of you, whether there are ways that it can accelerate or shorten the timeline of producing something truly innovative. That's interesting. I think Cole mentioned earlier there was protein folding, and that was before ChatGPT. So I think again, though, it's really going to involve a partner, like a person who understands what they're trying to get at and then running through that. So right now, I don't know how good it is at just coming up with those ideas by itself. I'm interested to hear what the other panelists have to say on that.
Yeah, I mean, I end up answering this question more or less to a lot of people on like investor calls of all places. But because the thing I always like to point out is that all model architectures and everything that we have right now, it's really good at interpolation. So being able to take things that it's seen and give you some mashup of that. It's not good at extrapolation. It can't by itself come up with something that is absolutely never seen. A musical example I usually give is, let's say you take all recordings of pop music that ever existed and you shove that into some model. It could be like amazing in generating pop, but like it itself will not be able to discover hip hop. So like there's some amount of like, you need to be able to innovate. You need to be able to think creatively. You need to be able to pull something out or make if it's making a connection that's like between things and it's just like a subtle change of that, maybe it could get there, but really like anything fundamentally like different, it's just not what these things are made to do.
Yeah, well said. Pepe, anything to add?
No, I think you just put on. I think, yeah, it has been. You need to understand what is the goal, no? So you can use whatever that makes more sense, and yeah, I think that Cole mentioned it like, well, actually, the three of you guys, you're usually very briefly, so not much to say on my end.
Okay. I do want to move into some audience Q&A, which I have a feeling we'll touch on some topics we haven't talked about. So I want to make sure that this feels like a very open conversation. Please feel free to jump off the comments that your other panelists are making. So we've talked a fair amount about text generative AI. Can we talk a little bit about, we have a question related to image generative AI like DALL-E, which I may be pronouncing that incorrectly. And thinking about how businesses might use these applications. So maybe this question is twofold, is one, giving us a description a little bit of what does it mean for an image generative AI? And then what might be some business applications?
Having worked at Shutterstock, I feel like I might start this one. So DALL-E, and yes, you said that perfectly. It's a model that it can do one of a couple things. One is you can start with text, like a description, like an avocado chair, and it will generate an image of a chair that's shaped like an avocado. You can also give it an image and then give it some text and then ask it basically to change the image based on the text, or you can like cover up parts of it and say like, like color out the sky and say like, make it a lightning storm, and then it'll do that. So that's all cool. One of the things fairly recently that Shutterstock did, so there's a deal between Shutterstock and OpenAI where OpenAI bought a number of like a large collection of images and their associated text, and they used it actually to train DALL-E 2 partially. And then sort of as part of the partnership they had with that, Shutterstock also gained access to DALL-E 2 on their actual platform. So like when you go to shutterstock.com, the search bar there, you can look for photos that they already have. You can also type in something that you want and it'll actually hit DALL-E, bring up generated versions of that. So on the one hand, that's like, they're a stock photography site, they want to sell photos, here's a photo, you generated it. On the other hand too, and this comes to more of a usability question. As cool as it is to say like, hey, I just got this thing and it's what I asked for, it's almost never exactly what you wanted, which is just, you can't perfectly describe what you want, even if the model could do it, right? So there's a feeling where people don't like rolling dice. They like to see stuff. At least this is how we're used to. So you search for images right now, you get a wall of images, you scroll, you find some. So in a way to make this more palatable, they have it so that you can generate the image and then it will also show visually similar stock images from the catalog next to it. And then you could also do it the other way around where I'm looking at stock photos. Here's some generated versions that are similar to it. So it's a way of like sort of expanding the catalog and also keeping the user experience in mind.
Thank you, Cole. Benjamin, go ahead.
Yeah, I have maybe one interesting answer to this and one boring answer. But yeah, when I was at Grid, we did an experiment where we fed our headlines into image generators just to see what it would generate in terms of a featured image or like a cover profile or stuff like that. And so, those are kind of the straightforward one-to-one ways you can do it. That's my interesting answer. My boring answer is always read the terms of service on these things, because when you're using these free tools, a lot of them, and I might be off on this, but a number of them, you can't use it for commercial purposes when they're generated. So, if you're thinking about how to use it for business, just make sure that you're crossing all your T's and dotting your I's, because I think there's going to be a lot of concerns over free use coming into this around copyright law and other stuff as these models become more prolific. So just something to consider, there are ways you can do it, but you don't want to run afoul of a variety of other things when you're doing so.
At the end of the day, they give you options. No, they give you options on how you can get new designs, and when you can use that for your business. Imagine in retail, for example. So there's a lot of design that happens in there, and when you have these kind of platforms, at the end you have opportunity to create, to tweak, modify, but ultimately it goes back to what is what we're doing and then start like any other design. No? So.
Awesome. Jihei, anything to add or you're good?
Oh, I'm good. Panelists said it well.
So then one of the things, again, another question that I, maybe as a professor is of interest to me as well, that someone asked, and I love this question, is people have difficulty determining whether a document was authored by a human or by AI. Is there any evidence that an AI may be better at doing this, identifying what wrote it?
Well, I'll give a brief answer to that. It's a little embarrassing. I have to say, given that we have so many technical people and engineers, that I think the marketing copy that ChatGPT generated was probably better than some of ours. Now, having said that, it did need editing. And then I think for sort of narrative type work, essays where some more personality or stylistic elements come through, that's, I think it's not as good as a person, right? So it's a little bit sterile, but for technical and business writing, sterile is okay. And then you put a little bit of spin on it. So that's the short answer that from our perspective and playing around with it.
And then any thoughts too, and I think that ultimately is 100% accurate in terms of the identification though, right? If I'm an instructor and a student has submitted 2 pieces of writing, or maybe you as a business owner get 2 resumes and you're trying to determine, hey, was this written by a human? Is this actually the most qualified candidate for a position I've ever seen? Or was this written by AI? Is there any evidence that AI can help us determine if it was written by a bot?
So certainly I think there are people, and I'll probably turn this over to someone else on the panel as well. I mean, certainly there are tools that would look for statistical elements and other types of anomaly to find that. I'm not current on what the state of the practice is on for that detection. So I'm going to defer to someone on the panel who may have looked at this.
Yeah, I was just going to say, this is really kind of a niche industry you're seeing spring up and develop really fast. Because I think that certainly there is something to be said about if you're a professor, if you're somebody who interacts with, your class, these people for a year, a semester, however long it may be, you kind of know what their writing style is. You might be able to pinpoint, oh, well, in this one, this is like not quite the phrase they would use or the style I've seen previously. But also you're dealing with like 30 different people submitting like multiple papers each semester or something like that. And so that's where that scale aspect, I think, gets really difficult that we've talked about. And so, yes, there are systems and tools that at the rate that which, generative AI can generate text or essays or other stuff like that, I do think AI would be a more effective tool than just a person for trying to catch, one bad paper amongst, 60 or so, just by nature of the fact that we have limited bandwidth. So that's my understanding, at least, because again, this is an industry that's growing in parallel with these processes as they proliferate.
Go ahead, Pepe.
I was going to say that also, can tell you how you can build a relationship with the person, because if you get to know your students, if you get to know the person, you can identify, hey, this is not sounding like him or like her. No, in my case, I think, well, it's a funny thing. Like English is not my first language, so when I get something into ChatGPT or this generative AI, I need to review that, because it doesn't sound like Pepe. So I need to tweak it and modify it and make it my own. At the end of the day, it's like that. So back to the trust, yeah, but that can also help with human interactions and try to understand who your audience is, who your students are from a human perspective, and that will be just a way to identify how if a person is really writing something, no?
Cole, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight something that's sort of like the flip side of this, which is all of this is trying to detect, like, I have some arbitrary thing, was this written by a person or AI? There's other research going into, like, being able to do this, but more in the terms of watermarking. So, like, was it my AI that generated this? So that you can detect, are you stealing my stuff? And so it's the same with text, same with images, and so on like that. That's more of, it has to be implemented in the model. So, like, if OpenAI, for instance, did this to ChatGPT, since you can't have access to that, anything that it generates would be watermarked. You wouldn't know, but they could. So it wouldn't help, like, me to detect if it is, but it would help them find it. And same again with images and things.
So almost, and just to follow up, because that is so interesting, about almost like intellectual property to some extent. This is a product which my software or my system has created. Wow, that's interesting. Yeah. And then again, folks in the audience, please, if there's additional questions related to that or anything you want to follow up on, please go ahead and put it in the chat. So we have a question that was asked about 40 minutes ago or so, and I'm going to read this just because I think it's really detailed. I want to make sure I don't miss anything. Is, what are the ChatGPT limits to access all electronically stored data? And do you see an explosion of more uploaded data to give these platforms even more power? I attended the Javits MFG, not sure what that acronym is. If anyone knows, please let me know. A show on Tuesday, and you have operations people wanting to take ChatGPT onto shop floors to record machine operator procedures, so-called tribal knowledge, for writing standard operating procedures. Oh, the question just disappeared. So sorry, let me find that again. There we go. For standard operating procedures, multiply the number of potential new applications. Will the storage required or needed across the internet grow too fast to be handled by current hardware? So the infrastructure, which I don't really think is a topic we've talked about yet. So I would love to hear folks' thoughts about that.
So I'll take from the bottom end of that. I don't really think storage, that's an easier issue to solve. So I don't think it's a storage one so much as the earlier issues with compute. It takes a huge, yes, you need a lot of data, but you need way more compute. And then there are implications with the compute, as I think Cole had mentioned, with the enormous amount of impact that has both for energy and climate. So So that's that part of it. I think if I remember this backwards or moving up, they were talking about standard operating procedures and trying to capture tribal knowledge. That's certainly something that is relevant for us in the maintenance domain. Oftentimes there are the instructions that are written, but people on the floor who are the technicians who really know what they're doing, they end up coming up with steps to fix that aren't necessarily written in the technical manuals or procedures. So if you can watch someone who knows what they're doing and generate operating procedures for someone else to learn or do, then that's certainly a huge use case. And the tribal knowledge thing, it's a big unsolved problem right now because there are people on the ground who know what they're doing. That knowledge is trapped within a certain tribe or certain group of people on that operating floor. And you need a way to capture it for so many reasons. You know, that person leaves, they know a weird specific fix. And so I think it would be, again, it's one of those things that it's fantastic if they can capture it, but you ultimately need whoever knows what they're doing to check that it's correct. So I think that's a fantastic application if one can do it correctly. And then I don't remember what the top of the question was, because I feel like there were multiple multiple ideas there that were coming through.
Yeah, I think it was definitely about the standard operating procedure, and then just the ability for, I think, as Cole alluded to, just the simple power to kind of run these algorithms.
Right. Yeah. And I just remembered the other thing. I think they're asking what information are these large language models scraping? And certainly, you know, Wikipedia, news sites, Reddit, any of those types of things, that it's accumulating all of that information. And that's where it's going. That's where a lot of the sourcing is. In fact, there was a Washington Post article that described a lot of the common sources that these large language models were using. But even before they became popular, Wikipedia, Wikidata, those were things that got sourced all the time. So, yeah.
Benjamin, it looked like you unmuted. Go ahead.
Yeah, which is creating its own set of conflicts, right? Like that's a big reason Reddit's wanting to, charge for its API access now, because it was like, wait, all of our company information is being used to train these models, and we're really not seeing a net benefit from that. And, I agree that the hardware and storage isn't necessarily an issue, but one thing I do want to kind of point out is that just the information regurgitation, like from these models, could become its own issue, particularly as they're uploaded online. Like people are using basically text generation to game SEO systems on search engines and stuff like that, generate basically crap websites that have affiliate links and stuff that where ads can be placed that can earn them money, but aren't actually written by a human. And I think there's a paper out from Cornell, I want to say early this week, but I would need to check myself on that. But that was looking at the issue of how AI generated information being uploaded to the internet and then being used to train further AI models can degrade the models on their own and potentially break them. And so that's something I do think that is a concern as people use these more and more and then upload that information online, is future web scraping, certain other things like that can really degrade actually what we're getting down the line. So it's an issue that we're probably going to see in some cases, but when we think about just massive amounts of information being uploaded, it's not so much the storage, but where that information then goes, who it's generated by, and what that has for the future of AI, which I think is really, really interesting and worth considering.
Yeah. I think, you mentioned something very interesting, which is the power of community. And when you open this to the masses or to all people, yeah, I mean, ChatGPT in this case, and this question specifically, well, they feed on data. The more data, the more people who is using is the more data that the systems are consuming. So the only thing that I will advise in this case, if you intend to create use cases for the manufacturing shop floor and so on, that those are valid and those can be very good use cases. But specifically for ChatGPT, be sure that someone will be looking at, so someone will be watching. So don't put something that can be a secret. Don't put something that a process that can be a copyrighted or patent process or manufacturing procedure manuals, etc. So just be very careful on that. And the other thing is, okay, so in terms of infrastructure, in terms of modeling, well, try to consider what can you build in-house. There's another interesting concept, right? You don't need to own the servers, so that's something that you can also host on the cloud. And as the cloud also grows, well, you can see more and more of these artificial intelligence use cases using or working remotely without owning all the infrastructure. So that can also help with some part of the cost. And yeah, that's it. What I want to say.
I'll add one more thing, just because it might be interesting for people, that this is all currently assuming that the ChatGPT is the only tool in the house that you're using for this. And one thing, especially for dealing with, usually you just refer to it as like private data, which could be like your in-house tribal knowledge. It could be something, whatever, that just isn't something it's trained on. You can actually, like, if you search for relevant pieces of information there, put that into your prompt and ask a question about it. You can get ChatGPT to answer questions about what it was not trained on. So that's how you build in these sorts of things. It's a technique called retrieval augmented generation, and it's very good at doing these sorts of things.
Wonderful. So I can't believe it's already almost 2:25. So what I want to do here before we conclude the panel and kick it off to Peter Donnelly is I want to ask folks for 30 seconds each, is there anything else that you would say about this intersection of AI and business, either that you'd like to reiterate or something we haven't talked about today? Jihei, I'm going to start with you, and we're going to go through the order.
Trust but verify.
Short and sweet. I love it. All right, go ahead, Pepe, you're next.
Yeah, so AI is reshaping what productivity means. And well, I hope that you see, or you saw today, good arguments and use cases that can benefit. And well, excited to see where the world is going to be.
Cole?
Jihei took mine, but yeah, always think about use case first. It's about what you want to do, not what you're doing it with.
And Benjamin, last words.
Yeah, there's the old Silicon Valley saying that I hoped we had grown out of at one point about move fast and break things. I'm worried that we might be going back to that in terms of AI. So just move slowly, move cautiously, and that's the way this should be approached.
Wonderful, thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and I want to thank our panelists again for their insightful thoughts. I will now pass it on to Peter Donnelly, who's the Associate Vice President for Technology Partners. Peter, take it away.
Thank you, Christine. As Christine noted, I'm the Associate Vice President for Technology Partnerships here at Stony Brook. I work with the CEWIT team, our hosts today, and others on our broader team to accelerate the adoption of impact of advanced technologies. And we do this primarily by collaborating with companies on focused technology projects, including artificial intelligence. Let me begin where Christine left off. Thank you all for joining the discussion today. We are very happy to have you. In wrapping up, I'll state the obvious, and I think it was covered by some of our panelists. The potential of AI is enormous, and it would seem growing every time we turn around. I won't attempt to capture exactly what that means or what that potential is. Versions of it land in our inboxes multiple times every day, and our panel has certainly done a much better job than I could attempt to do at highlighting potential and applications. And of course, there are very real and legitimate concerns about AI. We need to pay attention to them and proceed with our eyes wide open. I think that is Benjamin's caution in wrapping up. At the same time, AI is here and it isn't going away. As a consequence, we need to understand it at a minimum, and for probably most of us, begin to consider how we might implement it where safe and effective. As we've noted, the number of applications is large and growing. I would be remiss without some thank yous. Special thanks, of course, to our moderator and panelists, Christine Gilbert, Cole Ingram, Benjamin Powers, Jose Francisco, Pepe Valiente, and Jihei Yun. You have all done us a great service in sharing your expertise and experience. This is one of those subjects that is a little bit of the brave new world, and we do need help in understanding it, and your lending that expertise and experience to us is immensely helpful. Thank you all. Further thanks in leading and organizing us to Derek O'Connor, our workforce development lead, and certainly to Rong Zhao, our CEWIT Center Director. A couple of quick programming notes. We will follow up this event with a live event on the same AI for Business theme. The date is being determined. In planning for that, please give us feedback and thoughts in the survey. Our intent is to serve your needs, and the direct feedback is immensely helpful in that regard. One specific save the date, our CEWIT conference is this fall, November 15 and 16. I believe you will see a flyer when I disappear, but the theme is Innovation Edge, technology for a healthier, safer, and more sustainable future. We hope you have benefited from the discussion. We hope further that it has sparked some thinking on the application and adoption of AI in your organization. And certainly, if you think we might assist with that, please reach out to us. Thank you all again.